I'm not sure if you can hear me, but we're unable to hear you online. Are you able to hear us in the room? I'm not able to hear you if you all are hearing me. We still can't hear you in the room. If you can hear me. Nope, nothing in the room. It sounds like the individuals online are able to hear me speaking, though. I just can't hear in the room. I believe Peter also is unable to hear from the room. There we go. I can hear now.
Oh, that shouldn't be.
Yeah, I'm able to hear now.
Is it picking up now?
Yep, I can hear.
Okay, awesome. I guess I just needed to unplug it and plug it back in. Can you confirm that other people can also hear, or? They could not. I was getting messages. But I'm asking, can you confirm for, like, for example, Peter Lewis? Can he hear? Can somebody else chat or raise your hand?
Peter, can you hear us? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, he can.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Sorry for the, I don't know why it was doing that.
No problem.
Okay, so going back to your point, Liz, then I think you're correct. It should be read, the committee discussed how the estimated unassigned fund, general fund balance would be affected. Because that's where the focus was.
And isn't it also true in the upper, the second bullet under 550, small capital borrowing was previously part of the tax levy. In 2026, 43,000 will be funded as a transfer from the unassigned fund.
It's being transferred from the general fund to the small capital.
Oh, is that what's going on? I thought
Yeah,
I thought we had money coming from the unassigned fund.
I think
That's-
some part of the unassigned fund's not its own fund. It's part
yeah,
of the
it's just
general
one
fund.
fund. It's just a,
Sorry, I was trying to fix the sound. You had another one before that I didn't make a note of. Was there another
we changed
correction?
the heading, right, to October 27th.
Zero one.
We added the 0. And then the last one was the sentence that read, the committee discussed how the estimated, we're inserting the word unassigned fund balance would be affected.
Estimated, how the estimated general fund.
Unassigned general fund.
Okay, estimated unassigned.
Yep.
Thank you.
But back to that second bullet point under 5:56 PM. Small capital fund borrowing was previously part of the tax levy. In 2026, 43,000 will be funded as a transfer. I mean, that sentence just makes no sense.
Yeah, there's something wrong with that.
Yeah, when you carry on, it doesn't.
It just doesn't make any sense. So it's either transfer from the unassigned fund balance makes sense, is budgeted to be,
Yeah.
or is budgeted to be transfer from the general fund is budgeted to be drawn from the unassigned. You can't be, I mean, it's redundant.
So I think what we're looking to say there is the general fund. It is true. It's probably in that bullet, the last partial line there should be general fund, unassigned fund balance.
Yeah, so Julie, thank you for that. I think everyone now understands that. The next point is that it kind of says the same thing twice.
Right.
It does say the same thing twice. So will be funded as a
Well-
transfer from the general fund, period. Or get rid of that and say is budgeted to be drawn from the general fund balance.
It's, no, actually, it's two different things because the transfer is from the general fund to the small capital fund. So that's a journal entry type thing.
Yeah.
And the money for that is not being levied. It's coming from the general fund unassigned
Unassigned
fund
fund.
balance.
So then that just.
So it's
insertion-
confusing, but
But you have
that's
to insert into there, that it's from the unassigned general.
great. So I'll just add unassigned in front of fund balance in both of those instances.
Not the first instance in that second bullet point. So it's from the general fund is budgeted to be drawn from the unassigned.
General fund, unassigned fund balance.
Correct.
I'm with you.
I'm sorry, I'm still not understanding the sentence structure.
I
So,
know, it's confusing.
43,000 will be funded as a transfer from the general fund is budgeted, should be, and is budgeted to be drawn from the general fund unassigned fund.
As a transfer from the general fund, you're right. 42,000.
I know we're not the,
No, it's bad.
but I'm trying to.
It's bad.
Oh, sorry, we are the
No, it is. What I did is I copy and pasted notes and I didn't fix that. I didn't put in real words there. I apologize. That's me doing this at 4 o'clock on Friday. Yes, I will correct the grammar.
What should it read? In 2026, 43,000 will be funded as a transfer from the general fund, period. And then it is budgeted to be drawn from the general fund unassigned fund balance. Is that what it should say?
Yes, it's thinking outside the box.
Yes, much clearer. Much clearer. That is correct, Liz.
Now, do you want a motion to accept this minutes with those corrections?
Yeah, this, everybody understand now I think 4 changes?
I would actually motion to table this until those iterations can be made. And then
Second.
presented to us so that we can, then just the same way we did with the last.
That's fine. We can table this till our next meeting.
And I apologize, everyone.
That's all right, Julie. We're fine. Okay,
You've been kind of busy, right?
let's move on. So. Okay,
So, wait a
Um,
minute, so I motioned to table this. Marilyn seconded that. Is that by consensus? I mean, when you have a motion, you have to have a vote.
did we ever make a motion to approve the 27 minutes? I don't know that we did. I think we were talking, got into the corrections before we even had the motion.
That is true.
So,
You did.
yeah, so there was no motion on the table, so we'll just move on. And we will pick up these minutes at our next meeting of the finance committee.
Okay.
Yep, is that okay, Julie? You got that? Okay. Let's move on then. Public comments. Julie, there's no one else in the room, but is there anyone else online who wishes to make a comment?
Would anyone online like to speak, or you could raise your hand or turn on your camera? Make sure that the chat is on his or her side.
Okay,
I think we just have observers tonight.
so ready to move on? Okay. Let's go on to item 6, discussion Eller's financial model presentation. Welcome, Ariana. Good to see you again.
You as well. Thank you for having me.
So how does the committee want to proceed? We can either do one of two ways. Either Ariana can walk us through the presentation again, although a number of us were at the board meeting where this presentation was made. Or if you prefer, we can go directly to Q&A. Allow a bit more time for that. Does anyone want to hear the presentation again, or shall we go on to Q&A?
I think it's helpful to go through it. I know I was there before, Mark, but
Sure, that's fine.
I don't totally
Fine.
absorb everything.
Ariana, can you do that for us?
Yes, absolutely. Do you all have the presentation in front of you, or is it helpful if I share my screen so we're aligned on the same slides?
I don't know that.
I think it's helpful if you share your screen, please. I think
Sure.
we all do have your presentation, but just so we can be sure that we're on the same. And people at home can also possibly see.
That's true.
Absolutely. I believe I should be sharing the presentation, but are you able to confirm that you are viewing it too?
We got it.
Yes.
Wonderful. All right. Again, my name is Ariana Schmidt. I'm here with Eller's Public Finance Advisors, really to walk through the financial management plan that we've been working on for the last few months here. I understand this is really meant to be interactive, so please don't feel the need to hold any questions until the end. We can talk through them as we go. So just to kind of summarize again why we're here, what we're really trying to do is help the village to make a strategic, proactive decision-making profile. So really by looking at not just the budget year in current process, not just the past years, but taking a variety of assumptions, historical trends to help us project into the future, to help kind of identify pressure points and where any areas of opportunity may need to be assessed. So this allows you to do so before those pressure points boil up, so you can make decisions accordingly leading up to that point. Keep in mind, this isn't meant to be a future telling test, not meant to say that what we're projecting is necessarily accurate, because it is all based on a variety of variables and assumptions. So the projections are only as good as those assumptions. These will change year over year, so please keep that in mind. Another big variable is the capital improvement plan and the financing plan that we have built around that. And I'll talk about what that really means in a little bit here, but just kind of wanted to set the stage again. I'll probably skip through this because I know you've all heard this and it kind of just reiterates what I just spoke to. In terms of those assumptions I was referencing, these are some key assumptions built into the model. So as we project forward in the financing plan, there is equalized value projected. It's based on an assumed economic appreciation of about 4.5%. This is based on historical trends of where the village has been. In terms of net new construction, this is really important in terms of how much you can increase your levy each year. We've used about 0.5% assumed net new construction on an annual basis for the future years that you'll see in the projection, which equates to about an additional $13,000 to $14,000 that you can increase your levy by, subject to levy limits. On the contrary, our expenses are increasing at a level greater than that. So that is going to contribute to why you see an increasing deficit year over year, because by increasing the expenses without increasing the revenues at the same level, of course, there's going to be a growing gap. So we have over here kind of our expense codes. So we took your line item detail budget from 2026 as well as the years prior. We assigned various codes to them based on category, and we apply increases. So this is really the movable object. For example, wages. This is something that we were given feedback on by the board back in July, indicating the desire to have a 4% increase year over year. Now, maybe that's something that will or will not happen, but that's the number that we're using for the projections. So keep in mind, these are all things we can change, but this is what goes into the model currently. Starting with your general fund. So again, we take a look backwards in time before we move forwards. So we start here by looking 4 years into the past, looking at actuals. Then we've incorporated your actual 2026 line item budget. And then we take a look into the future, and our projections go about 5 years into the future. Here you're seeing 4 right now. So what we're really looking at are your revenues against your expenditures. As you'll see year over year historically, you're not 1-to-1. Your revenues are not equaling your expenditures. However, in a budgetary practice, you want to make sure your revenues are equaling your expenditures. So going forward, we do have those tying out. The way in which we achieve a balanced budget is by moving the property tax levy. So this line up here, your property taxes for the general fund, we are solving this number to arrive at a balanced budget. So this does not necessarily mean your allowable levy increase is this number, but this is the amount of revenues that you would need in order to achieve a balanced budget to meet the expenses at the forecast increase levels that we had just talked through. So keep that in mind, and we'll show you what that means in terms of a levy limit gap for the go forward, but that's really how we're achieving these numbers here. So I know that's a lot of data, so I'm just going to pause quick and see if there's any comments or questions before I talk about the fund balance at the bottom here.
So what I understood you just to say there was that from 2027 and on, you're using property tax general. Basically, that's a plug number.
Correct. That's to say how much revenue you'll need to generate from the levy in order to achieve a balanced budget.
Have you done any looking to see whether or not we will be allowed to, given our current circumstances, levy to those items?
Yes, and there is a slide later on that showcases that exactly, and it'll show you the gap and why you can't increase your allowable levy at the level necessary to achieve this balanced budget.
Ariana, thank you for being here. This is wonderful. I looked at the July presentation today and this one, and I think it was kind of hard because I'm not smart, but the expenditures are lower on this one, this version. But I think I heard you say that the assumption about wages increase went up. And so just curious, what were the factors that caused the expenditures to go down in this version versus July?
Yeah, so a couple things. First of all, the launching point changed. So the increases are applied to the year prior. So in July, we didn't have your actual budget numbers, and we didn't have your 2025 estimated year-to-date values. So both of those values changed, which therefore changes where the launching point is. Additionally, when we presented to the village board, they gave us feedback on what they wanted those expense increases to be, and we changed those percentages accordingly. The other factor that would have changed is in August is when your values come out for the year. We didn't have those in July, so your equalized value and your net new construction became actual in the presentation before you tonight. So all of those variables resulted in changes that you're seeing here.
Got it. That makes sense. The slide before this, you've got the assumptions, the 4% for wages, 3% and 5%. Those are all the same numbers in July. Slide. Do you recall which of those assumptions were changed in July?
I don't know off the top of my head, but
Okay, yeah, no
I can
worries.
pull up my the July presentation. Indeed. Yeah, you're right. They are the same on the slide, but there are more line item codes that go into it than those three. Those are kind of the summary. So it might be the more additional detail behind the scenes that you can't see that adjusted slightly. But I'm more certain that the changes are reflective of the other factors I talked about, mainly
Yeah.
regarding the equalized value, the net new construction, and the actuals that changed.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's helpful to understand. So then, wages then didn't get changed, is that right? Wages are 4% in July and 4% now?
From what I see on both presentations, yes. However, I know there was conversation at the meeting that may be desired to change that 4%. You're right, it doesn't look like we actually made that change. However, it is something that we could apply a change to going forward.
Sure. Thank you, very helpful.
So one other thing I'll draw your attention to on slide 5 here is your fund balance at the bottom. So we have your unassigned fund balance broken out for your historicals. Obviously don't know what that is for 2025 yet, but we have your last 3 years shown here. Your unassigned fund balance has been increasing each year, largely due to the difference between your revenues and expenditures in terms of your actuals. You'll also see your general fund balance overall, which is also increasing. So we have called that out to show you the change, as I know you all are aware that this balance has been increasing and you are utilizing some of that unassigned fund balance to help balance your budget for this budget cycle. So that's one thing we were requested to include. And then the other note I do want to point out is if you look at this property tax line historically, it decreased about $1 million from budget year 2023 to 2024. That was due to a change in allocation in terms of how the general fund tax levy was reported. So there used to be the debt service and the small capital fund that was transferred out of your general fund after. So in budget year 24, this changed. So the tax levy is allocated by fund. So it doesn't truly mean that you levied $1 million less. It just means it's now categorized by each fund accordingly. So we've leveraged how the village is budgeting for this now for all projections going forward, but just to make sure you were aware this drop is intentional because of an allocation methodology.
Ariana, could you talk about how you modeled interest income and interest expense in years 27 through 30?
Yeah, so our interest expense is built into the financing plan in terms of what interest rate you have assumed on the debt. We just picked a constant 4% for that, given that the capital improvement plan and financing plan are tentative right now. So that is something that as we progress in this, we will get more pinpointed with. But 4% was a rough estimate just to make things simple and transparent for the financing plan purposes.
So
Interest
it doesn't matter. Sorry, just want to finish on them. So it doesn't matter how much debt we have, how much debt we borrow. You don't increase the rate based as a function of the debt load.
The way that it's modeled currently, that's correct. Now, of course, typically we would do that, but again, this is a very initial financing plan, so that is subject to change.
Okay. And interest income?
Yeah, I can pull up the model and tell you exactly what inflator we have applied. Give me just a moment here.
Because we had some, and we still do have some considerable interest income as a result of the borrowing of $6 million plus for University Avenue reconstruction and the
Yeah.
fact that that money didn't get paid out over a longer period of time. And we still have a significant cash balance, which is
Yeah.
earning interest. And I'm not sure how that, plays into these subsequent years.
Yeah, for sure. So we have assumed a flat $200,000 of interest revenue annually for the projections for each projection year.
Thank you.
Historically, the last 3 years, it was between 200 and 400,000. So again, that is something we can absolutely change, but upon discussion with staff and everybody in preparation for this, that was the number that we had determined to utilize.
Anything else on this page? No, shall we move on?
All right, we'll keep moving. So now we're going to talk a little bit more detail on debt. Before we incorporate any new debt or any new financings, we wanted to show you where your debt profile is at the way it stands today. So the way that we have this structured is on the left-hand side, your total general obligation debt service payments. Now, there are other sources that pay towards your debt rather than just the levy. So in red, we're netting out any other revenue sources that contribute to debt service payments, including your utilities, your pool, and a couple of your TIF districts. That leaves us with your net tax levy, which is the amount of debt service that you're actually paying for out of the levy. So really what you see here from 2025 to 2026 is a large drop of about $600,000 in your net tax levy. This is an opportunity to layer in new debt so that way you can keep your net tax levy level, because the goal here is to avoid that roller coaster impact where your tax levy is going up and down quite a bit. The reason this is something to consider is because there are two components of your levy: your general fund levy, which is subject to levy limits, and your debt service levy, which is not subject to levy limits. So legally, you are allowed to levy your total general obligation debt service payment. Now, in theory, your other revenue sources are paying into it. So that's why we really focus on your net tax levy. This is the amount that your actual levy would be paying towards debt service payments. So to try to help keep this predictable for taxpayers, given that there is no limitation on this, we'd recommend, again, that somewhat level impact. So I understand that the village has recently undergone a debt issuance for 2025 to help mitigate this big drop here that you see. So we've incorporated that based on the draft plans we were provided a couple of months ago into the future projections. So you will see that layered in. In terms of what else we've built out for future financings, a couple of things to consider. First, that 2025 financing that I just alluded to is made up of not only a levy component, but also water abatements and pool abatements coming from your pool revenue fund. For 2026, we understand that there was a capital improvement plan approved for a dollar amount, which I will show later, of about $3 million or so. So we have incorporated that financing as well. That financing is entirely levy supported. The reason that the pool portion of that financing is not supported by the pool revenues, from what I understand, is due to the fact that the pool fund is not in a position to take on any additional debt service payments, meaning the revenues are not there to make those additional expenses. So those projects would be supported by the levy as well. Thereafter, we took the larger 5-year CIP draft that the village has and really tried to isolate out each project by year to build out future financings. We understand that your CIP will change. The dollar amounts shown, the projects shown are most likely not actuals, given we don't know where the village will be in the future. However, part of this planning is really encouraging the planning of a CIP within that 5-year model, because that helps you to be more proactive in terms of analyzing your tax impacts like we did here, to see, okay, we understand in the next 2 years, we're going to have another drop. So if we want to fund a large project, the timing would be right to do so before that drop occurs to mitigate that roller coaster effect that we talked about. So that's really why planning for your large capital investment projects that you plan to fund with debt is done in a proactive way that allows you to make strategic decisions to help you and the village board determine what projects should we do and when. Should we borrow every year? Should we borrow every other year? And how do we structure that debt to do so? So again, we've taken the draft CIP we were provided by the village, but understanding this will change. So all of that to say, that is how we've built out this financing plan before you tonight. On the left-hand side in blue is again your existing debt profile. This is the existing debt before any new debt is layered in, including the 2025 debt. So this change from prior year, again, this is that big $600,000 to $700,000 drop in 2026 if you hadn't issued new debt. Then on the right-hand side in orange, we layer in the new debt issues, which we have an issue built in every year to coincide with the capital investment plan. You'll see up here this first line, if you can see my cursor moving, otherwise it's the second line from the top. That is the par amount of the projects that are built into each financing. So for 2026, again, it's about $3.5 million based on the financing, the CIP for 2026 that has already been approved. Thereafter, it's based on the projects built out in the CIP on an annual basis. So the way that we've structured the future debt is to capitalize on this column right here. So this is the same column that we're looking at over here in blue. Again, trying to keep that level debt service levy after your abatement sources pay into the debt to try to keep it around that $1.1 to $1.2 million mark. So if I draw your eyes to really this column here, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 columns from the right, it's your levy change from the year prior. Given we are adding a substantial amount of new projects and new money, it's pretty difficult to keep it exactly level. So what we've done is kind of approached it as a ladder increase where we're adding more debt each year. So in 2026, you see your debt service levy is increasing by about $40,000. The year after, we have it by about $55,000, then by about $70,000, and so on. So we're stepping up that increase slowly over time. So it's not one large increase all at once, but you're allowed to then fund all of these projects each year with a slowly, steadily inclining tax rate. Now that increase stops in 2031 because that's where the capital improvement plan ends. So your last debt issue is in 2030. Meaning your first debt service payment is the year after in 2031. So thereafter, we have built in a drop in your debt service levy. So that way, when at that time you have to build in new debt, new projects, we all know capital improvement projects are never going away. You're always going to have more projects to fund. That you have a drop built into your levy to incorporate new debt payments without seeing a large increase immediately. If this was zero, the minute you issue any new debt, you're going to see an increase regardless of how you structure that debt. So that's kind of the strategy behind the structuring of the debt that we have incorporated. And then you can see thereafter, it continues to slowly drop off as your existing debt matures.
Ariana, I have a question, please.
Yeah.
The far right column with the header taxes, and then the next total tax rate for debt service, annual taxes, $900,000 home.
Yep.
Is the next column, the annual taxes, new debt only, is that also based on a $900,000 home, which would mean to me that the Shorewood portion, we're not talking about MMSD, we're not talking about Dane County, we're not talking about the state of Wisconsin. The Shorewood portion for a $900,000 home for 2026 would be 1,147,000 plus 709.
Nope. It's 1,147 total. That's including your existing debt and the new debt. If we
So
were
that
to
includes that 709.
correct. Yep. If
Okay,
we were to look at the new
709.
debt only, that's the 709.
The 709 is new debt because of the issuance.
Correct.
Okay.
Hey, Bob.
Yeah, Ariana, truly, just a question of curiosity here. On the existing debt, your equalized value column, which establishes sort of the future casting to 2054, the value, the equalized value is, I think if my math is right, it appears to be year over year, like a 5 to 6% increase. And I don't know if you're nodding your head or not, but my question really being, is that just standard and pro forma, and is that a realistic way of looking at it? I know we can't predict the future here, but what are some industry standards there? Because it really does have an effect as you truly long range forecast.
Right, it definitely does. And what we've done is really taken a discounted average of where the equalized value has been for the village over the last 5 years. Keep in
Okay.
mind, this is also TID out equalized value, so this doesn't include the appreciation from the TIDs. So that also, when you close the TID, there is a substantial increase as well due to the bump that you get in your levy limit capacity. So that is also built in for the future TIDs. So ultimately, to answer your question, it is a conservative approach based on where the village has been. However, you're right, we can't predict the future. So it's not meant to necessarily say in 2054, it's for sure going to be this. It's just applying that blanket increase and really looking at the near term to see how can we project this out over the next 5 years. And then we apply that inflator the same through the life of the debt.
But it's a linear 5.5% or 6%. Is that right? Am I
Yes.
accurate?
Yep, correct.
Okay, thank you so much.
Ariana, have you done any modeling on years 6 through 10?
I'm sorry, can you say that
Have you
again?
done any modeling? Right now, you're modeling 5 years out to 2030.
Mhm.
That's what you're reporting to us. Have
Correct.
you done any modeling extending to 2031 to 2035?
We do not have that built out yet, no, and that's largely due to the fact that the CIP ends in 2030. So we could extend that beyond, but we really want to make sure we understand the village's tax impact goals first, because without knowing what CIP we're funding for those future years, we can back into a dollar amount that keeps the tax impact level or at a similar impact to what we're showing right now and just carry that forward. But we really wanted to start with 5 years to make sure it was the most realistic, and then we can incorporate years after as necessary as this model morphs.
Oh, I appreciate that. We need to road test the first 5 years before we extend it.
Right.
The other thing to remind the committee about is that this committee has not recommended and the board has not adopted the 2027 to 2030 capital projects that are currently being modeled in this plan, but they had to have something, so they defaulted to that. But at some point, I hope sooner rather than later, there will be a revised capital investment plan and hopefully recommended by this committee and approved by the board. And then that would be folded in and we would fine tune these numbers on that basis. So that would be the hope and plan.
Right. And one practice that we often see communities who continue to do the FMP annually is that they revisit that CIP every year during budget season. So it's a continually evolving document where you're always tacking on one more year each year. So it's not like year 3, 4, 5, all of a sudden your CIP stops. You're continuing to expand and improve that CIP over time. So it's a realistic working document.
And that has been our practice in the past. We just stumbled this year, that's all. So we will get back on track.
Yeah, completely okay. And even if you don't have one, again, we can back into numbers that say if this is the tax impact you want, this is how much that you should limit yourself in terms of borrowing for. So there's a lot of different ways you can approach it, but really the most strategic and proactive is to build it based on a CIP.
Mark, I have a question about the timing of that, but I don't know if that's appropriate. Timing of the CIP in the process with the board, is that an appropriate thing to ask you right now?
Sure.
Well, I think the board has a special meeting on the 13th of December to talk about facilities, and the facilities is the biggest part of this financing that's in the plan now. So hopefully the board will make some progress on that. I know there's also a desire to reinvest in infrastructure, particularly streets. So board needs to sort out its priorities. But we obviously have a lot of debt capacity. We will talk about that more with Ariana shortly, and what the impact is on our metrics once we start drawing down more funds for the capital expenditure program.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Ariana, I hate to be the person who keeps asking you to go back to your July presentation, but you mentioned the impact of when the TIDs close on the levy limit. And in the July presentation, you had a slide that I enjoyed that explained how that calculation works.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't mind, I think it would be, I would like to hear you explain it because I couldn't quite follow it. I think everyone here might have an interest.
Yeah, give me just a moment. I'm just getting to that. Oop. Let's see, is this the slide you are referring to?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is just an illustration. This isn't for every future TID that you have. Basically, what happens for existing TIDs is the year of the closure, you get a bump that's equivalent to 50% of your incremental value that year divided by your TID out equalized value. So in addition to what your levy increase is from net new construction, you also get an additional percent increase applied based on your TID final incremental value. So at the time of closure, the value is returning to the tax roll, and then you're getting this additional percent. So on the right-hand side, just kind of walk through this line by line. You see, we've got your actual prior year's levy. Applied to that, additionally, we have your levy for debt service. And that's what makes up, or excuse me, subtracting out your prior year debt service from your general obligation debt, since that's not subject to levy limits, you get to your total actual levy. So down here, what we're looking at is the incremental value, again, of that TID. Again, this is forecasted, so this is just a rough illustration. And then we have your TID out equalized value. That then results in a percent increase that you get. So for your terminated TID, that would be 1.3%. That number then gets applied to that actual levy from the year prior, and that results in this scenario an additional $30,000 that you could increase your levy by. So rather than just relying on this additional $20,000 from your net new construction, you would also get to add that $30,000 in here. So it's a one-time increase that gets added to your base for the future.
It's a one-time increase, but does get carried forward to future years.
Correct. It is not backed out in the future, so it becomes part of your base levy for the future.
So thank you. So using these projections, which are projections, when TID 4 closes, this is based on our TID 4, right? Even though it's an example.
Correct.
There would be $50,000 added to the levy limit.
Yep, and the 20,000 is just based on the net new construction, so that'll continue annually, but it's the bonus 30,000 in this scenario from the TID.
But both of those continue.
Yes, that's correct. But you will not continue to get an additional $30,000 each year.
Right.
It's one time you get that bonus 30,000.
Wait, so it's 50 and then the next year it's 50, or it's 50 and then the next year it's 20?
Nope, and then the next year it's 20. However, it's based on your prior year's actual. So because that 30,000 was in the year prior, that's built into that base that you continue to receive. You just don't get an additional 30 each year.
And are those increases then built into the projections that you've done?
Yes, correct.
Well, I guess they are and they aren't, in the sense that this model is only going up to 2030. So I don't even know if TID 4, which dissolves in, I think, 2030. I don't know if that's actually in this 5-year plan, but it would be in the 10-year plan, because TID 4 and TID 3 would both be dissolved in that time period.
Yes, and so the equalized value change for the future years does reflect it, but I think what you're getting at is that $30,000 increase to the levy, that is not projected, because again, that first year that you'll see that TID closure would be 2031 or beyond.
Thank you.
Yep.
That was really helpful. Thank you for pointing it.
So continuing forward, the geo debt capacity that Mark, you had just brought up is kind of what we're looking at here. So in terms of how much geo debt capacity you can have, you are limited to 5% of your equalized value of the village. So on the left-hand side in blue, this is taking your existing debt profile, same existing debt profile we just looked at, showing you how much existing principal you have outstanding and where that puts you in terms of your debt limit. So in 2024, going back a year, you were at about 26% of that limit. You see that decreasing year over year, especially in 2026 here, because of your existing debt maturing without new debt being added in. So then we take all of those financings that we just built out in orange, incorporate that into this model. And on the right-hand side in orange, that shows us then where you will be in terms of the capacity of your general obligation debt. So in 2026, when we have that new debt layered in, existing debt profile is at 16%. Incorporating the new debt from 2025 and 2026, you jump up to 23%. So the highest that you get, even with including debt issued through 2030, is 27% of your limit. So you're still in a really healthy position in terms of how much residual capacity you have. So what does that mean? In 2027, when you're at 27% of your limit, you can still issue up to about $42 million and still be within your statutory debt capacity limit. So you have quite a bit of room to issue more debt. Now, we do not recommend that you ever exhaust that full debt capacity for a variety of reasons, one of which is your rating agency really looks at this, and we really don't want to see it beyond that 75% mark, meaning if this 27% were to jump up to 75% or greater, that's when you may need to start considering not issuing as much debt until your existing debt matures off. Now you're a ways off of that, however, it's still good to plan for it. So what we have shown in the dark orange on the further right-hand columns is what happens if you self-restrict, meaning you had some sort of a self-imposed policy that says rather than allowing us to use all 5% of our equalized value, what if we only allowed ourselves to get up to 3.75%? So even with that higher restriction, the highest you get in terms of your debt capacity is about 36%, meaning you'd still have about 27 million in residual value to issue debt for. So currently, this is just a best practice that the village has talked about, but this is not a hard policy yet. This is something you could absolutely look to implement. We've seen a variety of communities who go through an FMP start to implement a policy like this to really help restrict how much debt you have outstanding at a time. So that kind of segues actually further into this slide, this top part here, kind of what I just talked to. So turning kind of this best practice into a policy is something that you could consider. Are there any questions on that?
Well, did you go past this slide?
Yes, I did intentionally, only because this slide talks to the slide I was just on. So I just thought while we're on that topic, I would just kind of highlight that.
So your suggestion is that we formalize a policy?
Not necessarily a suggestion, just something that Mark and staff had identified as it's something the village has talked about in the past, but it's never been actually implemented as a formal policy. So again, this is definitely a best practice that we see, not to exceed 75% of your statutory limit. But if you'd like to memorialize this into a policy, that's something you could absolutely look at doing.
Yeah, I think what we'll have to do at some point is to connect these policies to the actual cost of debt and the village's credit rating. So obviously, the more we borrow, at some point, it's a step function and it could change the cost that we have to pay for debt. It could change the availability of debt, although that's less likely. So I think just being able to connect those things at some point so that we understand that if we put a metric wherever we put it, so if the metric is 3.75%, or as you discussed in the second bullet point, 1.75, those metrics, how do those metrics tie back to the cost of debt itself and the availability of debt?
And the other thing to keep in mind too is you don't want to make your policies that you self-impose too restrictive, because once you have those policies in place, the rating agencies are going to expect you to comply with those policies. So you want to make sure that they're restrictive enough to help kind of guide your financial decision-making process, but not too strict in the fact that if you have significant capital investment needs, that you have the capacity and self-imposed authority to issue the debt that's necessary to fund those large projects. So going back a slide, since I know I skipped through this, this is the one main debt policy that the village does have in place today, which limits your levy supported debt. So debt not paid by other sources like your utilities or your TIF districts, and limits that to not exceed 25% of your operating revenues. So we do have this modeled out through 2026 with the new debt issuance for 25 and 26. You are within compliance of that policy, just shy of 25%. And then with the new financings we have built in, coupled with your existing debt maturing, you get slightly above that 25% mark by 2030. But again, these dollar amounts can be fine-tuned as you actually get to the point of execution of these financings. So that way you would stay within that limitation. But this is all to say you could execute the financing plan through 2030 we have shown, and with some slight adjustments, still be in compliance with your current debt policy.
Ariana, what I did at home is I got my Adobe booted up and I made a red line to simulate the 25% limit that we have self-imposed, because I found it difficult to understand the point at which we exceeded 25% based on projections. And it looks to me like right around 2027, based on my Adobe Acrobat lines.
Yeah.
I think it's 2027. And I also understand these are based on projections, on models that we haven't really agreed to. You're forecasting on a lot of assumptions and unknowns, and I'm understanding that. So please don't misinterpret my my remark to be an attack on you. It's not. But I would say that it would be more helpful if the plot, if your diagram would have been more transparent in color, so that that 25% line could have been visibly seen instead of imagined with my Adobe assistance.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We can easily make that change.
Doesn't it? It does actually look really good. So.
But I think the other thing to note about this slide is if you go back to the previous slide and you even apply the more restrictive 3.75% of equalized value, we still have substantial debt capacity.
Yeah, we're
Right?
doing pretty good.
Well, if you go to the next slide, which shows it as a percent of operating revenues, all of a sudden we've restricted ourselves based on this self-imposed limit from our ability to borrow what we could easily borrow under the 3.75 best practices. So that's a decision that the village needs to make, is are we, by focusing on this 25%, are we unduly restricting ourselves? And then what that means is we push off capital projects into the future, which to stay within the limit, but then inflation, if it heats up, eats us alive and costs us more than the savings, if you will, from the interest expense. So there's a dynamic here we really have to work through. I mean, first we have to decide as a village, what do we want to do, right? What does in our dreams, what does our capital investment program look like? And then we have to look at what the financing of that program looks like, and then see what the pinch points are. Where are we restricted? And is it appropriate for ourselves to restrict ourselves at that point? Or should we relax some of these limits while keeping some limits in place? So I think that's something we will be having to deal with, because our capital needs are very expansive in terms of roads and the like, and I think we've got a backlog. If we've reconstructed all the roads in the village, and we won't do that, but if we did, it would be like $40 million plus, and that's in today's dollars. So if we decide at some point we're going to make a major effort to reinvest in the west side roads, which haven't been reconstructed, then the question is, can we do that and still keep to, say, this 25% limit? Or do we need to make some adjustments there?
Well, Mark, I think that's the discussion that we've been having for at least 2 years. And I think that it's on our agenda and we should advance that.
Yep. Anything else on this slide? Back to Ariana.
That's it from my end.
Okay.
So kind of putting this all together now, this is kind of where we take a look at the overall total property tax levy for the village. So we take a variety of the components. Your general fund, historically you have levied for the small capital fund, both of which the general fund and small capital fund are subject to levy limits. And then we add in your debt service levy, again, not subject to levy limits. However, that gets you to what your total property tax levy is in terms of what your taxpayers are actually seeing on their tax bill for the village's portion. So we showcase this on an equalized tax rate basis. And then on the bottom, what you see here is your taxes based on that equalized tax rate, based on $900,000 in value. Couple notes here. $900,000 of home value does not necessarily stay the same each year, right? That's your fair market value. However, your home is most likely appreciating each year. So the reason you see this total taxes on $900,000 in value decreasing is because you're not seeing the increase in the home value. This is really trying to show you, without too many variables, what's the impact to $900,000 in value, not to a $900,000 home. So really what you're focusing on here is this equalized tax rate, which has been declining year over year as your equalized tax value grows. So when we take a look up here, you can see your total change in levy has been kind of all over the place, down 2%, up 11%, up 4%, up 2%. So that's just to kind of show you where the village has been. But then looking forward, what we're really taking now is think back to about 7 slides ago where we had those revenues against the expenditures, and we had that plug number for the general property tax levy. That's the revenue that was needed in order to get to a balanced budget, right? So that is the number we're carrying forward up here in your general fund levy. So this is to say, how much would you need to levy in your general fund in order to achieve a balanced budget? And then we can take a look to say, does that align with our levy limit capacity? One other note is that you will see the small capital fund levy goes away in the future years. This is because you are up against your levy limits, as you'll see here in a moment. So one way to get around this is to not incorporate your small capital projects being funded by the levy, because that is something you can fund with debt and or other revenue sources. So to make things a little bit less of a deficit, we've removed that. So down here in red, this is showcasing where is your total levy need to achieve your balanced budget in comparison to our projected allowable levy. Now for next year, budget 27, you can see that deficit is about just shy of 100,000, and that deficit gets bigger each year. Again, because your revenues are only increasing, remember, by about $13,000 a year, but your expenses are increasing much more than that. So these are the kind of things that can help you to identify, we know right now we're going to foresee some pressure points. So that can help to kind of start those conversations about what do we need to be doing ahead of time to get in front of those levy limit gaps. Now, this does include the new debt service that we've talked about, that bottom line right here. But again, your debt service levy, not subject to levy limits. So that is unrelated to the gap. So don't think anything that has to do with the financing plan is causing that gap. Even if you had no debt, you would still face this levy limit gap to your operating levy. Because again, there's 2 components, Operating levy, subject to levy limits. Debt service levy, not subject to levy limits. Any questions or comments on that? I know it's a lot. Again, not meant to be a fortune teller, but meant to kind of see conceptually, where does that put the village for the go
I think
forward?
this is super clear. It's, I just think it's wonderful.
This is my favorite slide.
I think, I agree.
Yeah, I like it.
I like it a lot.
I wrote all over it.
Did you?
Mm-hmm.
Ariana, do most communities that you advise that have small cap funds, you tend to encourage them to take that off the levy then? It's just a
Yes.
matter of practice.
It's the easiest way to help free up levy capacity because it's something you can easily incorporate into your debt issuance. And then it's still being repaid by the levy. So it's the exact same repayment source. It's just no longer subject to levy limits. So actually, we have built into your future CIP funding all of your small capital projects with debt. So levy's still paying it. You just don't have to be up against levy limits with that portion of it anymore.
Thank you.
And Ariana, you're not using what I call the surplus, if you will, of the unassigned fund balance
Correct.
as a means to close the deficit at this point, right?
Correct. That is not applied here at all. It is applied in the 26 budget because I understand that's how you achieved a balanced budget in 26. But for the future, there is no application of unassigned fund balance.
But conceivably, we could still be above the top of our range or within our range in 27, for instance, and use some of that fund balance as a way to reduce the deficit.
You could. It's just one thing to keep in mind that the rating agencies do look at that as kind of a flag as though there's unsustainability, right? Because you're funding operating costs with fund balance. So it's something that they'll take into consideration as they review the rating and the position of the village. But given the position and alternative solutions, it's absolutely a solution you can look to use.
Yeah, it's a one pony trick that maybe we can
Right.
make a two pony trick. I don't know. We'd have to look at those numbers closer.
Right.
Just out of curiosity. So the unassigned fund, part of it is where we've had surpluses.
Mm-hmm.
We-
Why does it go to the unassigned fund? Couldn't it go somewhere else?
Yeah, well,
Assigned?
we've actually got a bit of a pattern and you can see it back on,
I mean, is this the way everyone does it?
slide 5, I think in your deck, Ariana,
Yep. I got
shows
it
that's that bottom line there, which
right
each
here.
year from 2021 out to 2025, right? We've been these surpluses and that's because we either got more revenue than we budgeted.
Right.
For instance, we thought interest rates would go down, so we thought we'd have less interest income, but interest rates stayed high and the money to pay out University Avenue was paid out slower. So either we had more revenue than our budget or we spent less than we anticipated in our budget by either we didn't fill positions as quickly as we thought we would, or we filled positions with more junior people in terms of experience, whatever, so it was a lower salary. But there has been that pattern, which kind of saving us right now. So it doesn't force us to push on levy limits as soon as we might, but it doesn't last forever. I mean, our goal was to spend everything that we budgeted. It just didn't work out that
Oh,
way.
right. It just seems, but. So we've
Just as a
done something good and I just don't understand why we can't use it. I mean, Ariana is saying we shouldn't, the rating agencies
I
wouldn't
would
like
say we
it.
can use it. I mean, remember the way we've set this is we've bracketed, we have a minimum unassigned fund balance at 15% and a max
15
at
to
25. And here we're up at
20.
32.
Oh, we're up at 30. I thought we
I
were up
think
at
we're-
27.
Maybe it's
Whatever.
27. We're above the number. And so, for us to take it down to the top of the range, even if we took it down to the middle of the
20%,
range,
yeah.
I don't know that that would cause alarm bells to go off in credit rating agencies. But they definitely go off if we took it down to the point where we were below or near the bottom of our range. I mean, that's my opinion on that.
So one thing that you can do to plan for a known deficit in the future, if your unassigned fund balance runs out, when other levy sources run out, what do? Obviously, you can cut expenses. It's the first place a lot of communities go, but the alternative option is referendum. And this isn't to say you need to go to referendum right now. This isn't raising the panic flag based on things Mark has said, the use of unassigned fund balance and whatnot, the fact that you've seen a surplus in the past years. However, the referendum planning process is not fast, takes time, and there's very specific deadlines that must be met. So we did include some supplemental materials in here, just kind of explaining those planning concepts, timelines to think about, and things to just keep in mind proactively, because if you want to go to referendum next year even, you're already almost a little bit behind the ball in terms of planning for that referendum. So this is to say you want to start thinking about that well in advance. So did you want me to go through the slides? I know most of you had heard this already. I'm happy to talk through any of it or just kind of open it up for questions at this point in terms of
I
referendum.
think
outcomes.
the next slide might be helpful. That kind of shows what the deadlines are. I think it's
Sure.
slide
This one?
17. There you go.
Yeah, absolutely. So taking a look at 2026, you have 4 opportunities in terms of elections. You don't always have 4 elections in which you can go to referendum, as you know. In 2026, there are 4 opportunities. So I will take you to the August election, as I know this is one that would most likely be the easiest to achieve. But even to see August 11th, in order to meet that election, you have to have your filing question to the local clerk by no later than June 2nd. So that's about 2 months in advance. Now, prior to June 2nd, there's a lot of work that has to go into how do we figure out what our question is and how much we're requesting and what's the cadence that we're requesting for the referendum increase. The ballot is not user-friendly. The requirements by statute for how you have to word the question is not user-friendly. So if you just go to referendum with hoping that question on the ballot encourages enough voters to support it, you're most likely not going to see a successful outcome. There's a lot of work that has to go in behind the scenes to help educate your voters on what this question means, why you're asking for the increase, and how it's going to benefit the community. Because it's really asking to exceed your levy limits and increase the levy higher than what you're permitted to otherwise. So all that to say, if you wanted to go to election in August, you've got to start right now figuring out what's the amount and start educating your voters on what you're asking for and why. Yes.
Yvonne.
Yeah, Ariana, I have a question for you, and this is not supposed to be a trick question, but you just mentioned that perhaps the simple way of looking at this, covering the gap, is either to cut expenses, reducing services, but the way I'm going to characterize this, or go to referendum. Out of curiosity, is there a way through which you could look at the model that could back into it? And in other words, what I mean by that is, what is the net new construction that's required to not run the structural deficit? And I guess the reason why I'm asking that, it provides kind of a mile marker on perhaps a way to stimulate additional conversations to have more net new construction in them. Is that a way? Can you look at that through your model?
Yeah, we can definitely adjust the net new construction and show you the impact. But in terms of buying power, 0.5% is $13,000. So just quick math, if we know we're at a $90,000 deficit, 13,000 times 2 for 1% is 26,000. So for a 1% increase, that's $26,000. So if we multiply that by 4, we could get close to 100,000. Again, this is very rough math. I'm just doing it in my head on the fly, but that would tell me about 4% net new construction would get you roughly $100,000 of buying power.
And what does that 4% look like? How does that calculate? So, and I guess I'm thinking more in dollar value added to the tax roll. Does that equate to a $5 million, say, project coming online, $10 million, $15 million?
Sure.
That's the part that I can't follow, or I just don't know.
Yeah, we could dive into that further. The DUR really kind of sets what your net new construction is and what that buying power is, and it's all based on your prior year's levy limit worksheet. So we can definitely run that for you, but that's not one I can do off the top of my head on the fly.
No, I'm not expecting you to, but I hope you understand kind of the motivation
Yes.
behind it.
Yep.
As we're looking
Completely
at
understand.
University Avenue corridor and that district overlay plan, what does that feel like in a future state?
Sure.
What do those projects look like, and how can they overcome the structural deficit?
But it would have to be outside the TID.
Well, and that's to your point, I think there's also this construction that is being discussed at Sweetbriar. And is it possible that you're suggesting, let's look at what the construction value would bring to the community versus not having that construction and then going to referendum to raise our taxes? Is that a fair?
Yeah, sort of.
Paradigm.
I was probably thinking more in bigger terms. That's why I used like those bigger numbers.
Right.
Like if there's truly an increase in value along the University Avenue corridor with a bigger project, a larger scale project, 5, 10, 15, $20 million, is that a way to overcome the structural deficit? And that's why very poignant the question, what does it take to overcome it in a hypothetical scenario?
I think that would be really helpful to understand, because when we're looking at referendum, and we're looking at the budget and we're saying cut the expenses, and we're looking at a possible referendum or wheel tax or different ways to generate revenues, I think understanding that new construction would be really very helpful to people to understand, because there does seem to be a sense that that people don't want a referendum. But we can't have no construction and no referendum and no expense cutting.
Yeah.
It's just not going to work.
The other thing to keep in mind too is your residents may not always understand that if that new construction is occurring within a TIF district, you're not realizing that, right? Because that's what's being retained by the TID. That's the increment that the TID is keeping. So you'll see that eventually.
But so what you're saying then is if we were to do the University Corridor project and it were a TID, it doesn't actually help us with net new construction for many, many, many years.
For levy limit purposes, you're still getting that money. The village is retaining it, but you have to use it to reinvest in the TID. It won't
Right.
help you in terms of your
It doesn't help
operating
the
levy.
taxpayer
Right,
immediately.
right.
That's
Well,
really very interesting.
If it caused us to have extra revenue to pay down the TID debt faster, then the TID could close
Yes,
earlier. And get
absolutely.
the tax money back on the rolls.
Right.
I guess if I
Yeah, Mark.
may, those are all accurate, but it could also be that a TID might not be required or possible for them. Something, I was truly just focused on what would it take, or in a hypothetical, what overcomes the structural deficit in a net new construction way.
Yep.
And then
And
layer on
yeah, I can definitely run that.
But just
Yep.
that raw sort of way of looking at it.
Sure.
Thank you.
I think that's a great question. Thank you.
Ariana, do you have a slide like 17 with these dates that's for 2027 as opposed to 2026?
Yeah, I can get it for you. I don't have it tonight, but I
I
can
don't need it
definitely.
now, but I
Yep.
think it would be helpful for us to just know, are we talking about, 2 windows, 3 windows?
Yeah.
And I just would, point out on this one slide that you have up now, this November window, the last one, really is not terribly feasible because it involves the staff having to develop 2 budgets. One budget for the referendum succeeds and one budget for it fails. And we've been there, done that, and don't want to do it again. So hopefully,
Yeah.
if we decide we can get by on 26 without extraordinary measures, without a referendum, then the question is, how soon do we have to focus on this in 2027?
Yep.
Yep,
I
okay.
can provide the timeline, absolutely.
But the risk is if we delay this to 2027, it's school board election tied. And the turnout is not traditionally huge for those elections.
No, but it definitely requires some planning. There are risks. You could also think we're gonna get through 26 and we don't make it. So, yeah,
There'd definitely be a great turnout. There was a referendum on the ballot.
Well, if people are voting against it, yes. But if you're trying to get people to go to the ballot to vote for a tax increase during a school board election, I'm not seeing it.
Oh, well, we differ on that, but that's right. I mean, just. Ariana, when would you have, I thought Dietmar had a wonderful request. When would you put that together for finance? So what
Yeah,
the net-
absolutely. I can most likely get that to you sometime next week. I am out of the office the latter half of this week. So sometime next week would be a reasonable turnaround time if that works for you all.
that would, I mean, would it just be a chart or 1 or 2 page document?
Yeah, the net new construction answer, that'll just be a simple chart. And then the timeline will just look just like on screen, but just updated for 2027 dates.
And Mark, you distribute that to finance when it came in?
you bet.
Thank you.
Okay, Ariana, you ready to move on?
Yeah, that was actually the end of it. This is just kind of the wrap up slide to summarize where we're at. So really the next piece of FMP is continued updates based on actual changes to your CIP and financing plan. And then the other big piece we haven't addressed yet is the utilities. So we do long range cash flow planning, similar to what you've seen here on the operating side, but specific to your utility, different structure that helps us incorporate what you need to finance for future utility projects that are funded by that utility abated debt. Because even though those utilities are paying into it, that's coming from revenues from the utilities, right? So you need to make sure you have rates in effect to sustain the need for those additional expenses. So the cash flow helps project out where your user rates need to be in the future. On the water side, being subject to PSC restrictions, understanding you're going through a rate case right now, incorporate that. And then also sewer and stormwater, a little bit less restriction, more control. We'd also recommend what we would forecast for those necessary rate increases. So that would be forthcoming into the new year.
Any other questions at this point? Hearing, seeing none, and I guess we're ready to move on in the agenda. Thank you very much, Ariana. It's a great help.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ariana.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Mark, just a question on the December 13th. Could you tell us about that? I don't see it on the events. Didn't you? You said there's a special meeting.
The special board meeting on
Oh,
facilities.
I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. So in the last board meeting, I proposed one of the final agenda items and topics was the facilities list and putting in priority order what projects we wanted to focus on, starting with 2026 from the capital improvement side with logic not going forward. We need to figure out what our new first priority option is. So we're going to have a special meeting Saturday morning, the 13th of December. I have it right now tentatively 8 to noon. It'll be kind of like the strategic plan was set up where it'll be kind of open for the public to come in, be a forum where we can talk. I'm contacting a facilitator right now to see if they might be able to assist in getting us focused on the important priorities and kind of figuring out what we all agree is going to be the first topic, but we'll have resident feedback to start the meeting and kind of back forth discussion with department heads and hopefully get something ironed out.
That's a great idea, but I think one of the problems have been historically folks give their wish list without any idea of the costs involved. And as I consider it just like a zero at that point. So I would hope that to the extent it's connected with realistic,
Yeah,
and it should go on the calendar. I don't
Yep.
see it on the
I
calendar.
was working on that today.
Oh,
We will be contacting hopefully Tom Deegan to come out and speak to some of the reassessment figures and numbers that he came up with.
That would be
We'll
good.
reference the other studies that we've had done related to the facilities thing. It's kind of new. I mean, we were only in the last couple of days of getting this all worked out now. So final pieces will be figured out and everything will be posted accordingly in the next, hopefully, couple days.
Well, I think that's a great idea. And one thing about Tom's proposals, he connected them with realistic, or not totally realistic costs, but costs, which to
Yeah.
date we never had on
I agree.
these things. Okay.
One thing you might think about that, Brian, is using the facilities modernization page, but stripping out some of the logic stuff, since that,
All of the logic.
just get that out. But we still, I mean, facilities is still an issue, facilities modernization, so it's someplace to post that new information as you gather it.
Because I think the community is really educated and alert at this point. Folks aren't always, but between the referendum, the logic, the last election, people are paying attention in a way they don't usually. So.
Let's
fashion.
turn to the next item on the agenda, number 7, discussion of possible action, the village fee schedule, which was included in the packet. Ron, you want to start us out on that one?
Yeah, so when we were going through the November agenda and looking at last year's agenda, we recognized that the fee schedule was approved that month last year. And in light of the fact that we had some conversations at the last finance meeting, and I think Gloria had mentioned bringing up some revenue generating ideas and bring that back to the finance committee. I thought it was appropriate, instead of including it on November's without a second set of eyes looking at it, whether the finance committee wanted to have any say in taking a look at this. It's not necessarily imperative that we have it approved on the November agenda annually. Some of these would obviously have to be vetted and talked through our consultants about when there's fees associated with building permits and factors related to zoning, but other pieces, accounting, excuse me, with like licensing, pet licensing and whatnot. But some of the other areas are possible options for us as a committee to consider. Maybe we want to do some adjusting to some of these fees to boost revenues in other ways for the village.
Well, I was excited to come to this meeting in part because of this. So thank you. Thank you. Because the chickens. No, because of the fees, because yeah, I do think that these should be looked at and adjusted. I went through and highlighted these before the meeting because she does her pen stuff, but I'm not that technical. I just use my Adobe. And for example, some of the zoning fees, I highlighted the dogs stuff. I had some of that stuff. I mean, throughout, I went through here and just kind of picked at some things. So for example, if I might just lead on this, the PUD, for example, $350 plus consulting costs in the rezoning application. Now, rezoning to me is, correct me if I'm wrong, if you're R2 and you want to change that to a different kind of zoning, you're saying $350 plus the consulting costs. I personally think that should be higher. It's such an unusual action to ask for a rezoning. It's not your normal, next door neighbor who's doing this. This is a developer who's looking to rezone. And I think that why wouldn't we charge for that.
Do we know,
I've heard people.
how other communities, like what Maple Bluff is charging or what Madison charges?
That is a great question. I haven't had that prepared for this meeting.
Yeah, that's a lot of
But
work
yeah.
to do all those calls, but perhaps we could have an ad hoc committee do it.
Maybe.
Well, how soon do you need to close on these fees?
Julie, do you have a
We've been doing it,
recommendation?
I mean, it doesn't have to be done at the end of the year. Traditionally, it was done in November because if the county increased their dog take licenses, they started selling dog take licenses in December. And that was the main driving factor. A lot of this stuff stays consistent throughout the year. This year, it was a very minimal increase by the county, so we didn't feel like we needed to really push it through in December, and we had done quite a few changes last year. I'd have to look at the packet that went to the board last year, but there were quite a few fee changes last year that were increased. A couple decreased, but overall, they did a pretty good overhaul last year, so we weren't anticipating too much this year. But with the finance talking about revenues,
No, I was really happy about this.
we can do it any time of year. It has to be passed by the board to go into effect.
So yeah, maybe we could look into that. I mean, maybe we could get on the phone.
Right,
and
I
do
mean,
stuff, but-
I think part of what residents need to do is we need to help. We
Yeah,
need to
I
do
think so too.
substantive things.
But
But Julie, just one question if I may. When it happened last year, was it based on any kind of survey of other communities?
I am not sure. Mark, I don't know if you guys remember, it's
I don't know.
It didn't come to
David
us.
Sykes, kind of, David, this is kind of David Sykes' thing, and so it was off my radar, and I don't know
Oh,
what went
okay,
into
David.
making the changes.
Or maybe we could get David as volunteer.
well, so just real quick, going through this, the dog fee, late fees, the cat fee, late fees. I just wonder, I've always wondered, I pay my dog fees. And I kind of grumble about it, but I do it, and like it's being a good institution, but like, for what? Like, what if I didn't come and pay my dog fee? And I know I have to show that he's intact or not intact. And I had to pay because he's intact. Different way of saying it. But, like, what if I didn't? What if I just didn't? Does it depend on my neighbor ratting me out that I've got a cat?
Kind of.
You know what I mean? So like, to me, then the late fee is kind of silliness. I think the $10 late fee, it should be a lot higher. That if you get caught, you're gonna really wish you didn't get caught. It's not gonna be a slap on the wrist. It's gonna be $50. I personally think the late fee should be higher to encourage people just to get it done. I don't think neighbors are ratting each other out. I hope neighbors aren't ratting each other out.
May I make a comment on that one before you go?
Yeah, did somebody rat you out?
May I make a comment for me?
Yeah.
I'm gonna rat myself out. And I'm gonna show up tomorrow. I'm gonna pay this with the late fee.
No.
But I
wait
never-
until December, mommy.
I never, I didn't know this was a
Finance
thing.
director,
I
did
didn't know this was a thing.
It
Like,
comes in your property tax bill.
how does a resident know they're supposed to do?
Because they get their property tax bill and they read all the
This
enclosures.
isn't the property tax?
Absolutely.
All right, well, it's my husband's fault, but I will pay it.
All right, Andy,
Whichever?
make Andy pay it.
Okay.
And so much of the laws is self-compliance. I mean, we
Yeah.
rely on citizens to follow the law without.
My point is, I guess we have to know. I
There's
understand.
nobody, no, that's actually to my point too.
But is there,
This is actually my point too,
Yeah.
later on.
okay,
But, so new construction and additions zoning fees. You've got by staff, $50, by consultant, so zoning review for building permits. If it's by staff, a person has to pay $50. If it's by a consultant, they pay $150. Are we for sure that $150 covers the cost of the consultant, or the $50 covers the cost of the staff?
Yeah, where are you?
I'm in new construction and addition zoning fees, and this is me picking up on something I heard Craig Weinhold say about, it's, I don't know, page 4 of 6, page 32 of 70 on the PDF.
Perfect. A lot of these, okay, that's the fire.
You see it, new construction, it's right in the middle of page 4 of 6. Do you see that? So my question really is, are we for sure that $50 is going to cover the cost of the staff person coming out?
Well, this varies greatly depending on the project, so.
But that's my
Yeah.
point, and that's the point that I heard Craig say on planning, is that sometimes we are actually paying, the village is paying to get some of the stuff done when the person needing it done isn't, because the fees are too low. That's exactly the point that I'm hearing from Plan Commission, and I'm applying now to this. And I don't know the answer. I'm just remembering and repeating. So, that to me was, I just want to make sure that the fees that it's a pass through really, that we're not incurring cost because somebody wants something done. Now to that, this is where I'm going to say, I want to see a reduction in fees. And later down on that same page is the community center rental fees. And way down at the bottom, nonprofit group rates, nonprofit organizations and village user groups. When I moved back into the village in 2014, there was a Girl Scout troop that wanted to use the community center to bake cookies for teacher appreciation. And Ellie Schmidt was the Girl Scout leader. And I said, well, Ellie, why don't we just use the community center? She said, oh, you can't do that anymore. I said, come on. And oh no, everything's changed. And doggone it, she's right. I was like, holy cow, she is not kidding. And this is well before your time, Brian, but it used to be that the community center was used for after school groups for the kids. And the community center was not charging our after school groups. There was the German club that went there. There was Girl Scout groups, Daisy groups. There were different things for the after school for the kids in the community that were using. And then it changed that we were being charged. And when I started with the recreation committee, it was because I went to the recreation committee and say, what the heck happened? And so they reduced the fees. But I would suggest that if it is a school group or if it's a youth group that services the youth in this community, and this community means to me the Village of Shorewood Hills Elementary School, or kids who are going to Hamilton and live in this neighborhood, or, I mean, that's my definition of community. If it's a kid group, they should not have to pay for using the community center. It didn't used to be that they had to pay. And I think that is generous in spirit. And I think it promotes cohesiveness and community, which I think is what we want. And it changed. I don't know why it changed. I think it was the yoga group. There was a yoga group, and the yoga instructor would go in early because it was so cold there, and she would turn up the thermostat, and folks didn't like that. But people doing the yoga group also didn't like freezing.
Well,
So
can we, yeah.
I
I'm not
just,
sure
I think
we
that this should,
discussed.
I think that this should be eliminated. I don't think that the kids should be charged. If they want to do a reading group after school at the community center, if they make a mess, absolutely, they should be charged to clean it up. But this is, I disagree with charging these community groups. Moving on, miscellaneous administrative fees. Next page is there's transient merchant permits, group, i.e. food court carts, special event food carts permit fee. So one is $500, the other is $20 per year. And I'm assuming that is to do with the food carts that's through the recreation committee.
The special event food cart permit fee, I believe, Gloria, was instituted about 2 years or so ago.
Right, but it's
Spearheaded by
waived
Shop.
every year, right?
No,
It's not for the food carts?
for the summer events,
Yeah.
no, don't get paid.
Oh, do they get paid? I thought they were getting waived.
No.
Okay,
$20 per vendor, but it is for the year.
For the year.
In effect, it's just for
Okay.
the summer.
Okay, so it's not getting waived. That was my question, is if that's getting waived.
No.
Okay. And the solicitor's permit, the next, see, I did not know this. The next time somebody knocks on my door for whatever, they're supposed to have a solicitor's permit, right? Okay. And then to your point about, I didn't know you could rent folding tables.
Yeah.
I paid a lot of money this summer to rent folding tables. Now I know, yeah. So does that include chairs?
No.
People, you have to stand at the table? You have to have your own chairs? Okay.
We borrowed from members.
Okay. You can't rent the chairs?
I think they have chairs.
They got chairs. On the community center. Here's in the community center.
At least the DPW know that.
Okay. All right, well, those are my comments. I think some of these fees should really be reexamined and raised significantly. I think that the late fees for dogs and cats, especially for her, should be a lot higher.
I'm gonna come in and play for 5 years.
But I don't think the recreation, I don't think the recreation.
That new 10-year-old dog that you got, yeah.
I don't think the community center should be charging, after school kid groups. I think that that's exactly, it's just not even getting used anymore because of those fees that were implemented.
AI just says that in Madison, the fees for conditional use permits vary depending on the size of the project, residential versus commercials, and they're not even listed.
Is that the PUD?
That was the
That's
conditional
cheating.
use permit.
Yeah, conditionally is.
Okay.
So I don't even understand.
Oh, I was asking about the planned unit.
Well,
development,
yeah, but they're
PUD.
both kind
Yeah.
of, they're both similar. So the question is why we even have one. We should.
Yeah, I covered. I would be sure. I don't know enough to have an opinion. I guess I just have a question or inquiry, which is it possible that better enforcement of the parking violations would both be in the interest of the community as well as of revenue?
Just, you don't even want to go there.
Really?
Oh, you
Don't.
got pretty ticked off about
Oh.
this.
Yeah, I really didn't know that was lightning around.
Yeah, it is.
They ticket.
Yeah, they ticket
My desk
regularly.
just got ticketed.
They
I
check
paid
it
her
regularly.
It depends on your street.
It does, they don't take it my street.
And people apparently don't even know the rules.
Okay,
But we learned them.
I'm
very
glad that I started by saying this is a question and not an opinion. And now I have an answer. Thank you. Back to you.
So you've gotten some feedback, some guidance, Brian.
Yeah.
We'll move on the agenda. So let's go on,
Absolutely.
because it's already 8:40 and I was hoping to wind this up in not too long an hour. Next item is discussion of the 2024 TID annual report. I said we'd get this on the agenda as soon as the report was issued. It has been issued. It's in the packet. I also included just a couple of pages at the back of the report, if you will, that just kind of simplified, gave you an overview. It's on page 50 and page 51, I believe, of the packet. And maybe that's just a place to start so that we're all kind of a level playing field as to what the history has been and how these things work. So we've got these 3 TIDs, right? TID 3, TID 4, TID 5. These TIDs have changed over the years. Sometimes properties have been added to these TIDs, but I've given you the years in which the TIDs were first formed. And then the critical thing is the value at the inception, or the value as the TID has been expanded, which is this base value. And the critical thing about that is the taxes on that base value is what's paid to the general fund every year. And that's what comes to the village. It doesn't come to the village, but stays in the TID in terms of tax revenue is what they call the value increment. That is the value that has appreciated in the TID district since the time it was created all that additional infrastructure and development and building, all that additional value, the tax on that value stays in the TID until the TID is dissolved in order to pay the expenses of the TID, the money that the TID borrowed in order to fund its development. As in University Avenue, borrowing the $6 million in order to do all the work on the north side of University Avenue and the sewers and all. That kind of is an example of that. And then you add that base value to the value increment, and then you get the total property value in the TID at that point in time. I've given you these termination dates for the TIDs. TID 4 is the first one in 2030. TID 3, which is really the large one, Marshall Court, 2031. And then the TID 5, which is the Lodge 2, is all the way out in 2024. And then the next page on 51, I've just summarized, looking exclusively at the impact on the village, what the property tax revenue that came into the general fund in 2024 as a result of the property taxes on the base value. Okay, so that's some almost $170,000. So the TIDs are paying into the village, but it's only a small amount of the total tax bill because most of it is retained in the TID to pay its expenses until the TID is dissolved. And then there's a set of projections that are in the TID 2024 report that indicate by TID, they do a projection for how much the village will receive when that TID dissolves and when we get the full property tax value, both on the base as well as the increment. So TID 3, which is the biggest TID, is only paying some $105,000 into the general fund now. But when that TID dissolves in 2031, the number is estimated over $600,000. So it's a big deal. And obviously the sooner we can close these TIDs, the sooner that value gets paid into the village jurisdiction, as well as the other 3 or 4 tax jurisdictions that are currently in operation. So that's really what I had as an introductory remark. I guess 1 or 2 other things. The TIDs, we only have the capacity to expand the TIDs, to enlarge the area within a TID, or to create a new TID of $5 million. So that's going to be a problem. Dietmar was talking earlier about University Avenue development. If we want to create a big TID on University Avenue, we would be limited to basically $5 million right now. Once we close some of these TIDs, beginning in 2030, 2031, that capacity expands. So that's something we have to keep in mind as we think about University Avenue redevelopment.
And the 5 million, if it may, Mark, sorry.
Yeah, the 5 million is.
Sorry, I made it up. But I'll carry on. The 5 million capacity to expand under the 12% test is based on the assessed value from past January 1st. So with January 1st, 2025, we're likely to have none left. So we're likely over it already, since we didn't do anything before September 30th, 2020.
I'm not sure how that works, and I want to check with Sonia at Vanderwall to make sure that there was any subtlety with respect to how that 5 million is applied. That we understand that, but that's what I drew out of the report. So to finish, there's all the commentary that begins, and then there are an appendix with detailed schedules of both cash flow and tax increment, and what's happening in the TIDs, the history of the TID, if you will, from the time it was created all the way through to the year that it's to be dissolved. Liz?
I listened to that meeting and it was very short. What I got,
For sure.
what I got out of it though, was there is a possibility for TID 3 to close early. I don't remember why they said that, as early as 2028.
Well, that's a good segue into, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Although that's very, not although, that is very interesting without the although. I didn't listen to that meeting. I'd be very curious to know what that is. Because when I was looking at this last night,
I think the consultant said that.
okay,
And both
Yeah.
John Imes and Dave Benferato said, we need to keep this on our agenda to see if we can close it out.
oh, interesting.
That's what I understood.
Yeah, well, that might be what I'm about to say, but so when I was looking at this last night, and I think there's some revisions coming. I understand there are some revisions coming to these
Schedule.
numbers, so, TBD on this next idea, but it looks like TID 5 is cash flowing to the tune of about an extra 100,000 per year. And that's not projected to decrease. So the conversation that some of us had by email last night and this morning is, could we make TID 5 a donor TID, which is a process that you go through with the Joint Review Board, where that extra cash flow every year could go towards TID 3 or to TID 4 in order to close them earlier. And if you just use these numbers, which may change, it looks like TID 4 with that support from TID 5 could close in the next year, potentially.
Okay, well, maybe I misunderstood.
Yeah.
I thought they said 3, but
And then if the revenue from TID 5 shifts to TID 3 after TID 4 closes, it could bring out the closure of TID 3, which is the big one, to Mark's point. And that could close, what, 2030, I think?
Yeah, right
Yeah.
now it's 2031, so it wouldn't be a huge move forward in time, but it would be something. So yeah, it's the possibility of being able to take some of these TIDs when they're in surplus. And if it appears, more than appears, if we can be fairly confident that they can pay out their remaining liabilities and still have cash left over, to take some of that cash and not actually loan it to the other TIDs, but to permanently give it to another TID.
Can do that.
I haven't experienced that before. I've only done the loans between TIDs, but I think it is possible because there is an incentive. It's for the village, but for all the taxing jurisdictions, if you could close these TIDs earlier, then they can also start to collect additional taxes that they don't have. So the only issue is just to make sure we don't end in a situation like we did with TID 3 a year or two ago, when we did the assessment and the value of homes, the residential, went up more than the value of commercial property. And therefore, the estimate for the tax revenue for the TID was less than expected. And we thought we'd actually have to make loans to TID 3 to make up that difference. So you want to be pretty confident that these kids can actually pay off their obligations as they come due. But that aside, if would think that the Joint Review Board and the village could agree that this would be a good thing to do.
they just said they were going to monitor the situation a little. I'm a little confused though, because I don't quite understand the way we're all organized. I mean, because if we could do that, that has a direct impact on the finance committee and the board. So it seems like we should be getting a lot, that there should be, regular reports on the TID. Because the time that happened, when the value went down, I remember the village administrator bringing that to this meeting, and it was discussed, and I was still like a deer in headlights going, why haven't we ever heard anything about this before? So it seems to me that this interrelates with this committee, and we should be getting regular reports from the TID committee, whatever you call that committee, to us.
The Joint Review Board.
The Joint
And
Review-
unfortunately, they only, to my knowledge, only produce a single report a year with this annual report. And they're way late this year in terms of here we are in, you know,
And
25's almost over and we've only got the 24
and
report,
it
so.
seemed like a
we need to-
perfectly self-congratulatory committee that never.
But actually, to that, can I ask this question? So it's the consultants that pull together this report.
It's Vanderwall that prepares this schedule.
And then
Right.
present it.
And so what does the committee as a function do? Yeah.
Accepts the report.
But then later on, when there's actually TID, that's where they come into play
Yeah,
more.
it's, if you wanted to amend a TID to add additional property to a TID, you'd have to go through the joint review board. So if it's business as usual, the only thing they do each year is
Once a
accept the
year. Okay,
report and they're
gotcha.
done. It's
So
only when somebody says, I want to make a change.
I
I
understand.
want to add value to the TID. I want to transfer money between TIDs. I want to close a TID early, that it would get their attention. So this is definitely on the radar now. Where we are at the moment is both Julie and I have been looking at the 2024 report pretty closely, and some of the schedules seem to be a bit off. And so we've got questions which we've put to Vanderwall. They're actually in the process of updating, making corrections, if you will, to the 2024 schedules. So once we have those numbers, the updated numbers, then at that point, I think we'll get together again and we will fine tune these projections and see what is possible about making these donor funds, if you will, available to TIDS, and whether we can actually use this as a source to end TIDS early and harvest the additional tax revenue and close the projected deficit that Eller showed us earlier.
Thank you.
Yes, Steve Martin.
Yeah, just, and again, perhaps related to what we're all talking about, just who takes ownership of that process. One of the things that I don't understand, is I'd like some clarity from Sonia on, if she indeed comes before this committee, is if the type of TID loan structure matters. Looking forward, again, sort of long-range planning. So I don't know if TID 3, 4, or 5 are the traditional TIF, tax incremental financing, or if it is more on a pay-go basis, which is also a vehicle that the municipalities use and what impact. So this is all my long-winded way of saying, how can we get this in front of us, whether it sits with the board, whether it sits with this committee? Perhaps I'm just throwing it out there for consideration. And
Yeah,
I guess I'm not adding into it as a future agenda item per se, but just a
Well, we'll
thought.
definitely, once we get these schedules updated, which shouldn't take that long, we'll definitely run some numbers and invite Sonia to attend the finance committee.
Great.
And we can give her the questions in advance, like, can you do this kind of stuff? You know, we appear to be having surpluses. Can we make the donations? Can we close early? So those technical, she's prepared to answer those technical questions. But yeah, it's definitely worth, and it will be on the radar going forward. Gloria.
I have a question regarding the map that was included.
Same question.
Did you? So you, okay, yeah. So regarding the map that was included, so there was a map included for TID 3, not TID 4, not TID 5, but the description of TID 4 and TID 5 with that overlay made sense to me. Just having the description of the lodge, McDonald's, with the other one being the overlay of the lodge phase 2. But my question regarding this map in TID 3 is that looking at that map, it looks like the community gardens and the parking lot and Post Farm Park are included in TID 3. And I wanted to know what goes into describing the perimeter of a TID map. And why would Post Farm Park, community gardens, parking lot for the pool be included in this TID 3?
Not sure. I could only speculate as to why that is. Now, part of it may have been that when we did University Avenue corridor, and they were doing work all the way from the hospital, right, all the way to Shorewood Boulevard. And we wanted to make sure those things were paid for out of the TID funds, right? So we didn't have to use the general fund, pay for the sewer improvements, to pay for all the things that were going on. So I think what they, I'm just speculating, but I think what the reasoning may have been that they enlarged the TID to make sure that the costs that were being incurred in the University Avenue reconstruction were eligible costs to be paid by the TID rather than paid by the residents, paid by us. Julie, do you have?
Well, I wasn't here when it started,
Yeah.
but keep in mind, they always also do full parcels. But that was owned by the village, and I can't see, I see the, I'm assuming this is the map on page 37 that you're looking at. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just so you know, TIF 4 and 5 are down here in green and red, they are,
Oh, okay, thanks.
because they're just in the corner.
Oh, there's-
So I can't tell how many individual parcels are in here on this particular map. You guys know the village better than I do. Is there a chance that that's all, because it's the tennis courts, Post Farm, is that all one parcel?
I don't know, but I just didn't understand why Post Farm Park and the community gardens and the parking lot for the pool. And why any of it would have been.
My guess is if it's all one parcel that goes up to university is my guess.
Possibly.
So you guys know better, you
That's
guys
true.
know better than I do, but that would be
If that's true, that would actually make a lot of sense.
That would make a lot of sense.
not an answer, but an
We
assumption.
could ask Sonia to clarify that. She would be more expert in that.
If you pulled this up on like Access Day and could see each individual parcel, it might
I'm
be.
guessing that explanation, if that would be true, I'm guessing that holds a lot of water.
And
It's a pool. It's a
Blue,
pool.
I know it's a that.
So we will get this on the future agenda as soon as we get our numbers updated and rerun the analysis and invite Sonia and talk about these strategies that would allow us to bring more of this tax increment into the village, as opposed to waiting another 5 or 10, or in the case of TID 5 till 2044
And does
to
Sonia
see that money.
does she do these schedules or is this Vanderwall does these schedules?
Scott Harrington, actually, I think, created these schedules, and then that was handed off to Sonia, after Scott's passing. So she's in the process of becoming more familiar with these schedules now, since she didn't write the Excel spreadsheets. So she's come out of learning curve pretty fast on that. But we've also kept her very busy in the plan commission, with a lot going on there, the setbacks, all that. That's also on her plate. So anyway, but I think this is an important issue because before we start getting too much into the referendum issues, I think we want to have a sense of, is this something, a real possibility in the near future, such that it would change our views about when we would need to go to referendum and the magnitude of the referendum. So I think that's the sense of kind of more urgency on it.
Just a question, how is Sonia paid? Is it different for when you're talking about the setbacks as opposed to coming in here? Are we paying an hourly fee, or is it part of TIF, or what happens?
Yep, we get invoices from Vanderwall for planning, zoning, any of the various, the meeting attendance, depending on what the issues are that we're asking her to attend for. So yeah, all of those get billed out.
And does that come out of our operating fund? Is none of it is charged to the TIF?
Somebody gets charged.
Yeah, sometimes it does, yeah.
Yeah.
What's their rates? If you
Oh,
remember,
I don't, right off the top of my head, I don't know them. Yeah, don't know the hourly rate.
because it's always good that if they show up, they're not free. I mean, it's important to know that and to be
Yeah,
concerned.
I mean, it sounds like the work we're talking about now would be very applicable to the TID and should be paid by the TID,
Yep.
which means it's not just paid by us, but it's paid by the other tax jurisdictions as well. So they ought to share,
Invoices.
because they're sharing the benefit too.
Yep.
If we dissolve the TID early, not only does the village get that increment, but it goes to all the other jurisdictions as well.
And our consultants are really good about annotating on the invoices what the fee was associated with. And when they are TIDs, we assign them to the appropriate accounting codes to allocate those charges appropriately.
So the hour now being 9 o'clock, we're close to the end of this agenda. If we could just turn to really the last item, action item on the agenda, which is the village financial policy. So we've been talking about this in committee for a while. We've been through a couple of rewrites, taken different approaches to how to tackle this thing. What gave me a little bit of urgency is the fact that when we decided to have the tax levy contributed directly to the tax fund rather than those revenues going through the general fund. I don't think it was appreciated at the time that changed the calculations in our financial policy about some key metrics that we have. So I went back to the financial policy and did a little quick markup in the policy to update the two formulas that we have in there. And I'll give you a reference for where I am in the document.
57.
But I gotta get down to it. Here we go. Here we go. So the first change was in this formula on it's page 6 of the policy, but it happens to be
57.
page 57, I think, of the document, of the packet. And so we had a formula that said basically just take your unassigned fund balance and divide it by your budgeted expenditures. Pretty straightforward. And that included the cost of debt because that was part of the general fund. And then we changed it and allocated the revenues from the debt levy, right? We contributed those directly to the debt fund. And so the money never went through the general fund. So it never looked like it was an expense of the general fund or the village, which it is. So, and what happened, what really brought it to my attention is when Baker Tilly started doing their year-end highlights for the board, their financial highlights, and they pay attention to these metrics. They actually calculate them and publish them. And I realized, oh, that number is way too good. It's way too high. They had, oh, you're well above your maximum with respect to unassigned fund balance as a percentage of the budget. And that's because the denominator no longer had the debt in it. So also I'm recommending at this point, I mean, we need to do a full scrub of financial policy, but I'm a little concerned that the auditors, the rating agencies will look to our financial policy, do a strict calculation based on the formulas and think we're doing better than we actually think we are. So it's not the right metric. Now, I don't think this is super urgent, but I think we ought to do it soon. So there were two formulas that had to have the same correction, if you will. The one that appears on page 6 of the policy, page 57 of the packet. And then when we did our debt policy, we also have that debt service coverage, right? And it's basically our annual debt service, the cost of our debt, principal and interest, divided by our general fund, right? But now the general fund doesn't have that debt in the denominator. So
That's on page 59 that you're referencing?
yeah, so those are the
57 and 59?
so those are the two formulas, which I'm just correcting for the policy change we made when we contributed the debt levy revenues directly to the debt fund rather than running it through the general fund. So at some point, I think we need to make those changes. I didn't really want it to get hung up in all the other changes we may make in financial policy when these are just really corrections. So I would Personally, I'd like to see that we, if you agree that these changes need to be made, that we go ahead and recommend these changes to the board so that the board can approve these, modifications to financial policy. And then we will have to come back next year and make additional changes, I think. A lot is coming out in the Ellers presentation. I mean, for instance, she recommended at one point 3.75 rather than having 5%. That 5% number is embedded in this policy. So that's a change we could consider. She also talked about the 1.75. I think over the assessed value of property in the village is another metric, which we currently do not employ, but we may wish to. I'm a little cautious about rushing into it because we don't want to unduly restrict ourselves and then find out, oh, we just changed our financial policy, we changed our metrics. Now we can't borrow the money that we need to do to invest in the pool or invest in a DPW building or whatever. So I'm not ready to recommend what the new metrics should be going forward until we complete the analysis of Ellers. But I don't want Baker Tilly or the rating agencies to continue to calculate things that are not what we really intended. And we don't want to kid ourselves that we're actually doing better than we are, just kind of the way the numbers come out. So that's why I've raised it. And for your consideration. Oh, yeah.
Page 57 made sense to me, the edits.
Uh-huh.
So if I were to read it, it says the new suggestion is prior year 12/31 unassigned fund balance divided by current year general fund budget expenditures plus budget levy debt expenditures.
That's
Right.
it.
So that made sense to me, but the edits on page 59
Yep.
were a little more opaque for me, how I would read that. So I wonder if you might read it the way it's supposed to say.
Okay. So, and I think some of these, did you make, Julie, did you make, did you
When I print-
further
when I
edit?
Print it into a PDF, it looks funky.
Well, that's
With the
exactly what I
edits,
did, too.
and that's why I prefer not to do edits in there. I like to actually change the document, but I couldn't.
No,
So it does look funky, and I was wondering kind of the same thing. Does it matter that it says revenues on page 59, but page 57 refers to expenditure? Because my question is, our general fund budget has to equal 0. Our revenues equal our expenditures.
Right.
But when we're talking about revenue, in this case, one of our revenues is using our general fund balance. And so it's kind of, it's like, so then does that include that or not include that? It's,
You know, I'm thinking of
and I'm
this.
sorry I didn't mention this to you earlier, Mark, but this was something I didn't notice until I was like rereading it.
Yeah, I think these were envisioned as just a single annual year calculation as opposed to an intra-year, that we wouldn't be testing this constantly, quarterly, monthly throughout the year.
No, it's an annual for sure.
Yeah, so if we do it on an annual basis, then the question becomes with respect to the formula, the debt service coverage that appears on page 59. The question is whether we want to use actuals or whether we want to use budget. And I would think it would be actuals in this case.
Okay.
Would you?
well, let's see that.
Well,
So are we talking about the denominator in the equation written on page 59? Total,
So the denominator would be the total general fund revenue let's see, yeah, it's gotten so marked up here.
I mean, should it be total general fund levy instead of revenue, so that we're excluding advances from the, on the side, our side would be
But
advance.
that's the thing is we do need to include it. What's happening here and why we're seeing us inch over that 25% mark. Our budgeted expenses, like our budget is not going up by inflation every year. But the equalized value does increase. And so what's happened is over time, our budget's not increasing, other stuff's going up. So even if we do nothing, we're still inching up. But I really think I'd be more comfortable with the word expenses there because that is what we are spending for our budget. So it should, and our revenue equal our expenses. But again, we have that question of what if we're derived from fund balance? So then do you count that or not? And if you don't count it, then that lowers that mark even further. But we're still spending the same amount. Does that make sense? Or am I talking in a circle here?
That makes sense to me. The total general fund expenses, that's what I say after 9 PM. Plus levy debt service. I understand.
Um, Well,
Yes.
Igor?
I may, since we're picking things apart with Roman numeral 3C, why is normally? Will normally not exceed. There it is, or it isn't.
Well, I think that's the problem that on the one chart that Ellers showed us, right? That you're gonna get perturbations, you're gonna get times when you're running a little bit above the 25%. But that the village is comfortable, like you're at 25.5. That's not a 5-alarm fire kind of thing. So I think the notion was to give ourselves a little flexibility and just say, over a period of time, it may go above, but it will come back down, whether that's measured in a 3-year or 5-year. Nobody tried to specify exactly what the time frame was, but that we would try to keep it down at that level over a period.
No disagreement. I just don't know what the word normally is adding. I get the fact that we don't want to be so restrictive to the extent that we then need to follow those restrictions. Right? But normally doesn't add any value. Normally it's just a filler.
It's equivocation. So
No.
what word would you like? He wants equivocation. Would you prefer generally?
Well, either we are exceeding or we're not exceeding.
Well,
I mean, you could say
you
plus or
approved the
minus.
CIP where we went over it, so.
Yeah, I mean, the way we handled this with the unassigned fund balance, the prior calculation was to have bands, right? The 15 and the 25% kind of thing. But I don't, this policy predates me, so I don't know what the origin of it was, but I guess the notion was they weren't comfortable banning it and preferred to just say, let it just stay in that ballpark. Would you like ballpark? Ballpark's the word everybody understands, where everybody uses that.
Mark is, I think it's salient. I think that a more financial word would be target. That 25% is a target. It doesn't mean you're always going to hit it, but that's what you're goaling at. And I think that normally does address that. But I think we could go more financial if it was helpful. I don't know that it is helpful. I think we gain a lot when we make our policy able to be read by many, many, many people and understood by many, many, many people.
So the auditors do read this stuff, the credit agencies do read this stuff. So, we don't want to set off alarm bells by making, in my mind, major changes unless we're prepared to defend it. What we're saying is we're making corrections. We made an accounting change, and now we just have to reflect that with changes in our formulations. And that's all we're doing, nothing to see here.
But at some point, we are going to have to talk about this 25%.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
we've been talking about it for 2 years. We
Yeah.
really are gonna have to talk about this 25%.
I absolutely agree, and we'll also need to consider whether there are other metrics that we would prefer or supplement these metrics with other metrics. Again, it goes back to that 3.75% rather than the 5%, whether we go with the other assessment value ratio that they had it, that Ariana suggested as a possibility. So there's definitely a longer conversation. I was just hoping not to get it caught up in the audit.
But so
Again-
what would the
Yeah, what's
language
the
here be? Because I really am not seeing the language because of the underscores and the blues and the, I just am not seeing the language.
Do you have the document, Julie, so that you could actually remove the markup and read what these two sections say
first
when
one
the
we-
markup is taken away?
The first one, I think we understood, the 57.
Okay, so really it's the second one.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I can get to it when I'm not logged onto the full system. Let me check.
Yeah, just-
I think I could read this
Okay, and you,
with Julie's edit.
are Julie ready?
I'm gonna,
Okay,
I'm gonna go with
go for it.
expenses instead of wait, what was the word you wanted? Expenditure?
Expenditure.
Okay. Well, we're gonna spell annual with one A. That's my only correction. And it'll be the big A. Total annual debt service payments on levied tax-supported debt, excluding tax increment financing debt of the village, will normally not exceed 25% of total general fund expenditures
Ah.
plus levied debt service. You're right, there's an extra word there.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
We want to say we just want to say general fund expenditures, like operating just shouldn't be, government operating shouldn't be there. Right?
I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's a general fund,
And then this will be.
its expenses are general fund.
Dietmar will be the only one who's not normal. Sorry, Dietmar. You've had a long day. I should have saved that. for
Just kidding.
But the two members on the board, don't you wish the board were operating like this?
I do like the fact that there's low drama. No drama is even better. Okay, so Julie, do you think you could read back to the committee that these two formulas and
Well, I think what Kate just read was accurate, or I can read it back again, but I think
Will you read it back again?
I can. I didn't retype it, but I marked the time you said it, so I'm gonna do it word for word here, but what I'm seeing is total annual debt service payments on levied tax-supported debt, excluding tax increment finance debt, of the village will normally not exceed 25% of total general fund expenditures plus levied debt service.
I like it.
That's what they're saying. Always.
everybody understand the correction? And the first formula, I don't think there were any corrections there. I think it's right, that one, we're okay with that one?
It sounded, I think everyone.
Okay,
And I did find a typo on page 61 of 70.
There's probably a lot in here. with that.
I only found one.
What'd you find?
At the very bottom of the page, last paragraph, second line, in the form of a letter. You just need preposition.
Oh, I see it. Okay.
Mark, when will the pool committee be looking at? I mean, you've already decided on fees for this coming year for the pool.
where are we on that? No, the pool committee did not recommend them because the pool committee was waiting to see the comparative rates at other pools.
Okay.
It was one piece that was not in the analysis, so the pool committee asked Dane to go back and gather what he could on that and bring it to the committee. And we now have a meeting scheduled for December 8th, I believe. There'll be one more pool committee meeting this year on December 8th. And on the agenda will be the review and approval, not really approval, review and recommendation to the board to approve those fees at its regularly scheduled December meeting.
Okay,
The normally scheduled meeting.
Normally scheduled. There you go. See, that's how it's used. And you picked up on it immediately. There was no, you didn't ask what normally means. You just accepted it.
That's so funny. So normally I wouldn't be this pedantic, but. Don't think about it.
But as long as we're in the ballpark, I'm fine with it.
Do want to actually raise a point because the Ayler's presentation, which thank you for bringing that presentation to this committee. I think that my impression is that the folks at this dais understood the presentation probably a little bit more than the board did. And I think that we were able to move through her presentation and ask questions that I think are very clarifying, hopefully to this committee, but also to eventually the board and larger community. One thing that she referenced was the levy being used to the benefit of the pool, because the pool doesn't have the money right now to do something.
Right.
And looking now at page 58 of 70, the special revenue fund, the swimming pool fund. My recollection is that there was a point in time when this whole paragraph was redlined out as being unnecessary. And then I spoke with somebody who shall remain unnamed, who was on the pool committee. And the discussion was the membership fees and how the former administrator was wanting to raise the revenues, the membership fees for the residents, but not the non-residents. And the argument was being made that the residents aren't paying enough. And at the same time on finance, this whole paragraph was being deleted. And it's back, so thank you for this paragraph coming back. But in this, I highlighted the pool facility occupies valuable real estate, land and improvements, which if on the tax bill would generate substantial property tax revenue for the village. So in effect, the village taxpayer is foregoing that benefit. When we're talking about taxes and property tax and net new construction, we are foregoing that benefit.
Not exactly, because the pool pays rent to the general fund.
And the property taxes too.
Doesn't pay property tax,
That's my
pays
point,
rent.
but that's my point.
But I'm saying it's,
But that's exactly my point. I know who pays rent. I'm not arguing about whether they pay rent. But we are foregoing that property tax revenue. If we were to sell that land and
And
have it
develop it.
developed, if it didn't hit 3, if we were to do that, we would enjoy tax through property taxes. And we are foregoing that. And yes, we do get rent that is paid for by the membership fees. But I really want to make the point that the taxpayers are taking more of an ownership of the pool through the foregoing of property taxes, because the land is publicly owned by the village. And by the village, we are ponying up some money to help the pool. That's our debt levy. And what else did I say? Village taxpayers ultimately bear the financial risk and responsibility associated with the ownership of and the operation of the pool facility. So I just want to say that next time the memberships fee schedule comes up, I would like not to see the residents portion go up if there's a raise. I want it to be a non-resident raise.
yeah, I think where it is now is like I think there's like a 20% discount for resident memberships as opposed to non-resident memberships. And I think that ratio has been pretty much the same for a number of years. And I think we've tried to standardize that. So there is a discount
I know there's.
that
a
all
discount
residents are
because I pay
getting.
my
The rent's
membership
being
fee.
paid for, all the administrative costs, the pool has to pay, processing payroll and
Oh, I
all the work
understand.
that's so.
But I am also remembering that when the membership fees were adjusted, it was for residents only that were adjusted. And we had an increase while non-residents did not have an increase. And the former administrator argued that that was fair and that was good and that was appropriate. And I'm saying now, if there's going to be an increase, it shouldn't be both the non-residents and the residents. It should only be the non-residents.
And that praising that the residents get a discount, I mean, I'd eliminate the word discount. We don't get a discount. We're paying our fair share. When you look at the broader picture, I think discount is very misleading.
We'll look at it. Well, the pool committee will take this up and then the board will take it up because these schedules have not been approved. But the hour is almost 9:30. I'd like to be able to get us all out of here. So would someone care to make a motion to recommend to the board? I would say recommend to the board the
Amendment.
Clarifications.
yeah, the amended formulas in section B, V, and
Financial policy.
yeah, the first one is in B, V, Roman numeral V, formula. And the second one is in section D, Roman numeral 3, section C. So D, paren, Roman numeral 3, close paren, open paren, C, close paren.
So this is to recommend to the board the amended financial policy. And then specifically, is that how we want to word this? I want to know how.
I would just say,
Specifically in section. The first one. And then
is
in
B,
section-
paren, V, close paren, form, and then the heading is formula.
And
And the other one is section D, paren, Roman numeral 3, close paren, open paren, C, close paren, general guidelines.
I got it, thank you.
I think you just made the motion.
I think I did. Normally, or.
Normally he doesn't, normally he has.
normally I don't, but- So is there a second
I'll
to
second it.
that motion? You'll second? Any further discussion about this? Hearing,
Second,
seeing
second.
none,
Is Gloria.
ready to vote? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. We will resume the cleanup of financial policy throughout next year, I think, with the work that Ellers is working, doing and then and the things that we ourselves have noted need to be updated and changed in the policy. So going back to the agenda then brings us to our final item, 10, future agenda items. That's been updated. I've taken a couple of things off, like the TID review and whatnot. I will put back on there the TIDs again, because we'll be looking at this, I'll figure out the exact wording, but something about TID closures or TID updates or something of that nature to keep that on our agenda.
Are we open? Or are we talking TID reviews, TID closure? What did you want there?
Yeah, but TID closures is a good way to do it.
Do we have utilities on there too?
I'm sorry, do we?
Utility, the review of the utilities, is there?
Yeah, as soon as Ellers actually
That's it.
does their modeling, we should be looking at that. And I don't
Yep.
know is there a time frame for that at all yet?
I don't believe she gave us one yet.
And we're still waiting on the water rate case and maybe
Yeah,
we'll have that big piece of information too, before we kind of tackle that, but I'll put it down.
Review of facilities, is that what you want?
Yeah, the utilities. Put down the utility finances, something like that. Okay,
I'm gonna ask you, for clarification, please. How can we help elevate something from a future agenda item to actually be on the agenda?
well, what's the topic?
Well, so for example, future revenue sources. We
Yeah.
talked on that a little bit today because of the fees.
Yeah.
But would it be helpful if a member of this body did the research and presented it to you so that it then could be on the agenda? Like how, I've noticed a
Yeah.
tendency for items to languish in the future agenda item.
That certainly can happen, has happened. We can get this on the agenda. I think,
Well, I'm just asking, how do we promote from the future agenda item to make it a regular agenda item?
Brian and I just put it there. That's how it's a miracle. It's, so I have
Usually
no,
having some supporting evidence or supporting
Yeah.
So
research.
if we did the research, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
If we were to do,
yeah, we
scratch
just-
up some research.
yeah, if I put it on the agenda, then someone has to carry the conversation, right?
Okay.
Yeah, because, I mean, if I bring something like the TIDS to you or Ellers to you, I bear the responsibility to make sure that that presentation or that
makes
discussion is led. And so people can understand what's
Makes
going on.
sense.
So,
Makes
um,
sense.
if you want to,
So for like Marilyn, if she wanted to advance the garden homes, she should do some research and come prepared, like give it to you so that you could review it and then you could decide from there to put it onto the agenda.
well, garden homes is kind of, I think the problem with garden homes is we don't own the land, right? So it's not clear how we can move the agenda on a property we don't own now.
Well, so if Marilyn were to do the research and come to, give it to you, then, and if you decided that was sufficient to add it to the agenda, then.
Sure, I mean,
Have at it.
Brian and I are happy to look at any.
I'm just asking process.
Yeah, as long as it's finance related, and that certainly is. I guess I was kind of hoping that Tom Deegan at some point would step up and come to the village and say, here's a proposal or
Well,
whatever.
there has to be a signal that it would be well.
Dave Marr, you've got your hand up. Are we getting too far off the
No,
agenda?
not at all. Actually, I guess I want to add to that.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm only this, again, speak for myself and sort of share the same sentiment on the board. I'm a firm believer of at the board level, a trustee puts a future agenda item on there, that they carry the responsibility of providing the information and delivering it to be considered as a future agenda item. I think there seems to be a disconnect yet, again, how that gets on, but a way that could be contemplated at board level, and again, this could apply to all committees, is to get the information to Brian and the chair and have it be on the agenda, and at the board meeting, and we approve the agenda, beginning of the meeting. A different moderator leading the discussion could say, let's get all the agenda items on there, and then the body decides at the time of approval of the agenda, what needs to come off or what's going to be considered and talked about. This is my long-winded way of saying, I agree that in order to move some of these conversations forward, information has to be put forth by the person requesting it. And I think it should be given full consideration at the next meeting. And the body could vote and say, hey, this isn't fully fleshed out yet, or yes, it is fully fleshed out, but we don't have time because there are other pressing matters, or hey, now is the time to have this conversation. I hope this makes sense.
I think that makes sense.
I have no problem with that.
Then that way we can find the move things forward. Now, if I could have the floor for 30 more seconds, an agenda item that I would like to put forward and realize that I actually can't provide any deliverable with this, Brian, is just a closing of the books on University Avenue. And you had sent out that email, thank you very much, from Chris Pedikowski as to what our total spend was.
Right.
I'm less interested in the accounting line by line how we got to the total, because I'm relying on the city of Madison to have done that due diligence. But I'm more interested than in the gap between our borrowing that we have put forth and the debt that we're now servicing, which is considerably less, and just how that fits into the overall picture. And that I'm just not clear on.
But that would be interesting.
So again, that'd be a future agenda item. I'll exclude myself. I can't provide actually any deliverable on this. I apologize.
Yeah, I like your little preamble, like, oh, everybody has to do their work.
Except for this specific item, that's it.
So what you're saying is normally you have to do the work.
And normally, yes,
Normally
the
everybody
target
else has-
would.
Yeah, yeah, target.
The target.
So,
But he delegated.
I think I just-
Thanks.
I think after what I think I just heard you say, what I heard you say is all of these items, for example, all these future agenda items, everything would be part of the agenda. And at the beginning of the meeting, the body would say, okay, looking at this big, huge, long agenda, we're gonna pick and choose which items tonight we're going to discuss. Is that what you're saying?
You're shaking your head, Julie. I don't know that we.
I'm
agree
gonna
on
say
this.
that that seems like an open meetings violation to me.
Why, if it's, if
Because-
the information is
because-
there.
Well, the information is there.
If the information is there.
Yeah, and if you're ready to discuss, for sure, but it feels disingenuous to tell the public, we're going to possibly discuss these 20 items. But then you come and then you decide in situ, no, we're only gonna discuss these two. I guess everybody could show up to the meeting and then go home.
I guess I understood him as saying these are things we discuss in the meeting before as to what will be on the agenda. What is, what,
Was my characterization correct?
I'm not trying to be disingenuous. I'm trying to figure out a way how to advance the conversation.
Well, I agree, but I'm asking, did I capture what you were trying to say?
That's my understanding at the board level. The approval of the agenda allows the board to not only reshuffle the agenda items, but could allow the board to take items off.
Okay.
Now, to what extreme that's carried through and forward, if you have 100 agenda items, it is unlikely that all those will be discussed, but trying to bring some normal sense to this.
Yeah, I guess, and I guess
This board.
we're kind of violating open meetings on this,
okay,
but I mean, I guess
unfortunately, I
like,
mean,
my concern with that is that right now, you've got often these
Yep.
rooms full of people. And if there's 20 items, as an example, and people come to the board meeting knowing that those 20 items might be discussed and they all are wanting, that, I mean, in a way, yes, it delivers a histogram for the board to understand what's most important to discuss, or maybe what's too hot to discuss. Let's take it off the agenda tonight. But I don't know how it settles people down. I think actually reducing the number of items on an agenda will help settle people down.
Yeah, I don't pretend to know the solution to all this. I'm just trying to figure out a way how to get things moving forward.
Right.
And this
No, I
is-
agree. We gotta figure something, because it can't just be this languishing.
Anyway,
So Brian and I will take ownership of B, financial policy. We will bring that back. We'll take ownership of TID closure. We will bring that back. We will bring back utility finances. But these other issues, the future revenue sources, a status report on Garden Homes, operational cost savings, I'll punt on those, I think, and ask the members who are interested in those things to develop the background information for the committee
I like it.
and bring it to Brian and myself, and we will schedule it.
plus closing of books on University Avenue for which I can't deliver.
Oh, that one too, yes. I'll put an asterisk by your
Please.
name on that one.
It should be the target.
Yeah. You're gonna be on double secret probation if you keep
Pretty
this up.
soon. Yeah.
Could I,
normally.
so with the TID closure,
Must have.
if we're able to do this thing where we donate the TID from TID fund, it's even better than my quick math that I shared with the two of you last night. After hearing Ariana explain about that bonus,
Oh, the bonus.
yeah, that it really could avoid a referendum.
Yeah.
And if that's the case,
Gotta get moving.
let's let's get that on the next agenda, to avoid some.
It
tough
will be. I mean, I
discussions.
think just
Yeah.
Sonia's got to finish
Okay.
making the corrections
Yeah.
that I've already talked to her about. And Julie, I think you still have some pending outstanding questions with her, right?
I had some questions on some of the
So
worksheets.
hopefully we'll get answers to that. As soon as we do, we'll get the new schedules.
Yep.
Distribute those to the members and we'll have it on the agenda. But I agree with you because there are these long lead times for referendum.
Yeah.
So if we think we're going there, we really gotta
Yeah.
pick up our game on that. But perhaps we don't have to. Maybe we can be bailed out. And that's why I asked her about like 27. I mean, if we can even buy ourselves another year or two.
Looks like you can
But I
buy
think the
yourself.
TID closures potentially does more than that.
I think we were going out together with two closures.
Yeah.
You know that.
Do we know that?
Maybe I must have been wrong about 3. I didn't you hear them talk about, did you listen to the whole thing?
Oh, yeah, I did.
Didn't they say that there was something that could close in 2020, might be able to close in 2020?
They wanted to look at it again.
But do you know
I
which
think-
one it was?
I don't know why I thought 3, but that. don't
I
think
thought,
3
I thought 3, and then I look at the material. I don't know why they thought.
I don't remember the 28. I know that they've been talking that they might be able to close TID 3 earlier. than
2028
anticipated. And I
she
just don't remember
mentioned
the
it.
year.
The,
Yeah.
whoever the woman, was that Sonia that was talking?
This was Ariana tonight.
No,
Oh.
at the
Yeah,
TID
that's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
Sonia, yep.
she mentioned it, and then they said, that was the only thing I got out of it is that there's a possibility of closing some of it or all.
Well.
I'm sorry, we haven't.
Sure, yeah, so
Oh.
one final, no, not yet. December, I assume you all don't want to meet at our regular meeting time in December.
This last?
Hmm?
We discussed this last month.
Well, I'm just taking the temperature of the committee again. Do you want to meet on the 22nd?
I'm actually here. I'm free.
I can do it.
Okay, then we will do it. I just thought you'd all be fleeing for warmer parts. But, okay, we'll see you then on the 22nd.
Right, where the land's at.
Okay,
You do need a.
all right, now we can do a motion.
I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you. All in favor?
I.
Thank you very much.
Have a great
Well,
day.
It ran a little longer than I hoped, but I think it was a useful meeting.
Well, super duper.